Good evening and welcome to the Western Placer Waste Management Authority's 10th Annual Odor Workshop. Appreciate everyone being here this evening. Obviously a little different than our last 9 events. This one is being held virtually, but we hope that you find it just as informative as our previous workshops. I would ask everyone, if you have questions, to please use the raise the hand option in Zoom. And our Zoom moderator will put you into a queue and we will answer those questions in the order they are received. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation. But if you have a question, go ahead and just raise your hand and that will get you in the queue. We are recording tonight's meeting, so you can go back and listen to it later. We will be posting it on our website probably in about the next week or so. We do have a couple guests here that I would like to point out online with us. One is Paul Holloway. He is our local enforcement agency representative, and so one of our regulators. We also have Molly Johnson, who is with the Air Pollution Control District. And then Paul Zura, who is our facility operator. Both the recovery facility and landfill should be joining us shortly. So if you have any questions that pertain to either of those regulatory agencies or our operator, hopefully they can answer that question as well. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and move into the presentation. Jeremy, no, we're good. There we go, thank you. So the agenda for this evening, we'll do some introductions very quickly and then talk about the authority and then get into the main topics of the presentation, which include discussion of regional odor sources and our odor monitoring efforts, the site-wide odor plan that the authority is preparing in conjunction with the local enforcement agency and the Placer County Air Pollution Control District, Senate Bill 1383, which is a regulation here in California that is going to have some significant impacts on the waste management industry. Then we'll transition into aerated static pile composting methods and how we're using those to improve our composting operation. And then wrap up with our waste action plan on how the authority plans on addressing needs in the future. And then we'll open it up for discussion with the group. So the first thing I'd like to do is introduce myself. My name is Eric Otto. I am the program manager of the Western Placer Waste Management Authority. And to my right is Keith Schmidt, who is our senior civil engineer. Next to him is Stephanie Ulmer, our environmental resources specialist. And then Jennifer Snyder, our engineering technician. And each of these individuals will be providing a portion of tonight's presentation. So I'm going to start off and give a brief view of who the Western Placer Waste Management Authority is. We are a joint powers authority that was formed in 1979 between the cities of Lincoln, Rockland, Roseville, and the County of Placer to manage solid waste issues on a regional basis. And we manage and do all the recycling and diversion of materials in the greater portion of Placer County. We are governed by a board of 5 directors, 5 elected officials from our member agencies. And our current composition right now is Mayor John Allard, who represents the city of Roseville, Councilmember Bill Halden, who represents the city of Rockland, Chairwoman Bonnie Gore with Board of Supervisors, who represents Placer County, Mayor Dan Carliskint, who represents the city of Lincoln, and Robert Wygant, who is also the Board of Supervisors representing Placer County. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Keith, who's going to give an overview of the authority's facility and its history.
Thank you, Eric. 45 years ago, the various communities, some of which Eric just mentioned now, including Auburn as well, and Forest Hill, they all had their own landfills. But regulations were coming that would make it more difficult to site and construct a landfill. So they got together and were looking at ways to save costs for ratepayers, and came up with a plan to build a more regional landfill that they could use together. And so in 1976, they made a solid waste plan and looked at 9 different sites where a landfill might be sited. And if you're watching this, you're probably not too happy with the one that they picked. However, at the time, it was far out from several of the cities, and yet close enough to where the cost of bringing the waste out to the site would be favorable. And so this site was picked, and in 1978, the landfilling began here. Some of those other area landfills completely closed probably around 1983 when the laws got even tighter. And so more waste was brought to this site and required that we purchase to the, I guess down on this page, but to the west of the current site, the authority purchased 600 more acres, so roughly making the landfill triple the size that it is now, at least in concept. But thankfully, the authority board and its member agencies responded to an opportunity wherein they took a step forward and built what was then a rather strange concept of mechanizing the sorting of waste. And in 1995, in the lower left corner there, you'll see they built a materials recovery facility. And that little gem has made it possible to where we have not had to landfill on the western property. And so the landfill has grown much more slowly and stayed within its permitted size from 1978. With that, in 1995 as well came a composting area, and that's for yard waste. And yard waste has become, there's more of it as the cities have grown. And so over time, we added additional composting area there. And then to separate traffic in the materials recovery facility from the everyday folks who come to the landfill, we added a public tipping facility. And again, chewing up landfill space in favor of recycling space, we added a construction demolition area in 2007 and a little bit more MRF space as well. Again, all with the aim of creating as little landfill as possible. And then additional composting area again in 2012. But again, if you're listening to this, it's likely because there have been odors emanating from this facility and perhaps others. And so we'd like to point out some of the other regional odors in the area. Starting with our own facility there in the green in the center. This boundary line in the orange color is the Sunset. Used to be industrial area, and now it's a Sunset area. And in the red dots up and to the left, we have a couple of long-lived farms, a poultry farm closer to the center, and then a dairy ranch out to the left side there on the west. The yellow areas represent places where woody materials are brought. We also accept woody materials here, and so perhaps some of the odors that you may have smelled coming from our site could also be produced by those sites. The blue dots or blue squares represent areas where wastewater treatment facilities are located. So I think we all know what that smells like, unfortunately. And then there's a propane dealer down there, the purple. So we are not alone, unfortunately, out here. But from our facility in 2014, we did our latest attempt at characterizing the flux, I'll say, the amount of emissions factors for odors that come off of our site. And what we found was that composting represented about 69% of the total odor emissions from our site. A smaller section was the active landfill areas, and that has a much different smell than what composting does. However, it's closer to that propane smell, which is more pungent. And the way we figured this out was, I'll show you here on the right, That is a worker walking up on the right to what's called a flux chamber, and it's a little polycarbonate pod they stick down onto whatever they're trying to determine the emissions rate from. And they are pumping clean, I think it's nitrogen, into that container and then taking a sample of the resultant material coming out of that chamber. So that's effectively pushing it out and determining what the emissions rate is. So you get from this, you get the smell that you would get that characterizes, whether it's a pleasant smell for you or not. And then you also get an emissions rate, so you can determine how quickly and it's coming off the material. We use that for this study, and we've also used it in the picture on the left to calibrate our computerized odor monitoring system. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Snyder to talk about that system.
So as Keith was just mentioning, we have a continuous odor monitoring system that we utilize on site. It is used to record the intensity of odors generated at our facility. We use the data from our on-site odor sensors and weather station, as well as the CalPUF modeling system. And we're able to generate a model of representation of the potential off-site transport and dispersion of odors and compute likely odor intensities at select locations. For those of you that have submitted odor notifications to us, this is the system that we use to generate those video clips that we attach on the odor notification response forms. Sorry about that. I forgot to skip to this slide. So this is, as I said, again, anybody who submitted an odor notification, likely you've received an attached video clip that shows data from our continuous odor monitoring system. And it shows, as you can see here, the plume of odors from our facility in the area. So another feature of our odor monitoring system is a reverse trajectory model that predicts the path of a theoretical odor particle based on data from our on-site weather station. I'll just briefly explain what this image is depicting. So this purple pathway is the reverse trajectory route. It represents the likely pathway of the odor particle beginning at the location of where the odor was experienced, shown at T-minus 0 minutes here, and backtracking to its location 60 minutes earlier up here. So recently, we have started looking into the use of off-site ambient odor sensors to complement our on-site odor monitoring system. The purpose of these sensors would be to provide an early indication of odor in ambient air, which could prove useful to the WPWMA in identifying and addressing odor issues before they are experienced by the public. We wanted to bring up this topic to see if there is an interest from residents in having us install these sensors. If we were to proceed, we would place them in public spaces, including parks, common areas, or any other locations that may prove to be beneficial in monitoring odors off-site. As I'd mentioned, we are interested in your feedback and opinions on this addition to our odor monitoring system. So later on during the Q&A segment, please feel free to let us know your thoughts on this. And with that, I will pass on to Eric.
Thank you, Jennifer. Want to talk now about the site-wide odor plan that the authority is preparing in conjunction with the Placer County Air Pollution Control District and the Placer County Local Enforcement Agency. And we've talked a little bit about this perhaps in the past. The site-wide odor plan is a tool that will be used to establish the best management practices that will be used here on site for preventing, monitoring, and addressing odors at the facility. And it's going to be a guide that will be used not only by the authority staff, but any of our operators or contractors and consultants that are coming on site and doing any sort of work. So it will provide a consistent basis for everyone to follow to do their best to reduce the potential for odors to be experienced offsite. As I mentioned, we're working with the LEA and APCD and really trying to evaluate community concerns related to the odors and how we can be a better neighbor. And by using this document, we anticipate this will provide a level of transparency and insight into how the authority operates and the methods we take to reduce the amount of odors that are experienced and leave the site. We have been working on this for quite some time with the Air Pollution Control District, and we believe we're nearing completion and hope to take it to our board of directors for their consideration later this year. Once it is approved by all entities, it will be posted on our website. So that'll be an available document that the public can look at and see the steps that we are taking to manage odors here on site. A couple points that are not shown on the slide that I did want to point out that are in the site-wide odor plan is it includes routine on and off site proactive monitoring by authority staff. So as opposed to our past practice where we would go out and conduct investigations once we received an odor notification from the community, this new element will obligate the authority to conduct regular off-site monitoring ahead of any potential odors that are out there. And the point there is to give us the opportunity to hopefully modify operations as necessary before odors are experienced by the public. It will clearly define our investigation protocol, as well as follow-up review, analysis, and adjustment of our operations based on the results of our investigations. And it also includes a commitment by the authority to conduct a regular review of new odor control technologies and methodologies that we can potentially employ here at the site to further reduce the odor potential from the facility. But with that said, it's important to understand that odors will continue to be a challenge as organics regulations drive changes in operations. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Stephanie, and she's going to talk about some of those regulations.
Thank you. So I'll be talking about SB 1383. SB 1383 is a monumental law that was signed in September 2016 that will impact Californians at every level. 1383 established methane emission reduction targets in a statewide effort to reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants in various sectors of California's economy. The vision is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030. The solid waste industry has been hit particularly hard as 1383 has a rather large focus on reducing the amount of organics that can be landfilled going forward. So 1383 established targets to achieve a 50% reduction in the level of statewide disposal of organic waste from 2014 levels by the year 2020, with a 75% reduction by 2025. And while those are statewide reduction goals, those diversion targets also directly apply to solid waste facilities, including the WPWMAs. So the Cal Recycle requirements of 1383 define organics as solid wastes containing material originated from living organisms and their metabolic waste products, including food, green material, landscape and pruning waste, and other organics, lumber, wood, paper products. Food and yard waste are materials that will most likely impact residential solid waste customers. The authority already composts nearly 100% of the green waste delivered to our facility, and right now a fraction of commercial food waste. Composting of food waste can increase the potential for odor generation. We all know how smelly our garbage can be when you put old chicken in there Sunday night and your can is not collected until Friday morning. Can be pretty smelly. So I'm going to turn it over to Keith at this point to discuss how the authority intends to incorporate food waste into our composting process, and also incorporating odor mitigations into that process.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to go back a slide here. The composting that you see going on in this picture is the classic composting that we've been doing at the site since '94, which is windrow composting. And it's really hard to make out, but way in the back is this sort of mechanized spider-looking machine that would drive over these piles of compost and agitate it like an auger and flip it over. Sorry, we're getting feedback over here. That has some limitations in that, number one, we have environmental clearance to compost the food waste that Stephanie was just speaking of, using a different system and not this system. So we tend to move forward with a different type of system. So one reason we intend to move forward with a different kind of composting system is to be able to legally compost food waste in that system. Secondarily, the machine that goes over the top of these windrows limits the height of the windrows and therefore limits the capacity of the concrete pad that this jurisdiction is invested in. And so removing that requirement will allow us to compact the compost operation. And then last but not least, if you could imagine when this machine goes over the compost and turns it up and spits it out to the side of it, it creates quite a lot of flux, pushing out the air from that operation. And therefore, if for whatever reason the composting operation smells at that point, it creates a great deal of odor emissions. And that's why in that pie chart that I showed earlier, composting probably had such a big component of the total site odor potential. So aerated static pile composting looks more like the picture about in the middle of this, with a taller pile, except for that instead of turning the windrows, you actually pump air into or pull air through the pile, and therefore you can establish a better control over the air going into or out of that pile. San Diego, there was a study done in San Diego, and it controlled this ASP style composting controlled approximately 90% of the green waste odors. And like I said, you could have this biofilter on the top of the pile to help reduce the volatile organic compound emissions. And it does allow us to compost green waste. We've been operating an ASP type composting system for a number of years now under a pilot permitted by the local enforcement agency. And now we've submitted some applications and we'll submit the rest this week to be able to move forward into a full-scale aerated static pile composting system, which will help us comply with the laws that Stephanie was just mentioning. Further improvements at the site to comply with laws are something that Eric's going to talk about next in the Renewable Plaster Waste Action Plan.
Thanks, Keith. So to this point, there we go. So to this point, we've been talking about current operations at the authority's facility, both in the past and current. Now I'm going to transition to looking at the future and how the authority is planning on modifying its facilities to address some of the challenges that it's facing in the future. So as Stephanie mentioned, regulations, particularly SB 1383, will have a very significant impact on solid waste facilities up and down the state, including the authority site. And one of our major goals and obligations is to ensure regulatory compliance for all of our member agencies that use the facility. So one of the key tenets of what we've coined our waste action plan for future modifications is to ensure compliance with the expanding regulations that apply to solid waste facilities. Secondly, Placer County is anticipated to double in population over the next 30 years. And with that increasing population will come increasing waste that needs to be managed. So another key tenet of our plan is to provide capacity to support current and future population of the area. Right now, we do not have sufficient capacity to handle the growth that we anticipate with that change in population. Added to that, historically, the materials that we've been able to recycle and pull out of the waste stream have been marketed worldwide, with a large component of that being sent to China and some of the other Asian countries. And over the last couple of years, China has significantly curtailed the amount of materials that they're willing to import for recycling, which has put a significant downward pressure on global recycling markets, which is counter to our goals of keeping more material out of the landfill. Ultimately, we need someone to buy those materials to turn them into new products for us to make it economically feasible to pull them out of the waste stream. As we look at expanding our operations and addressing compliance, that also gives us an opportunity to increase the amount of materials that we're pulling out of the waste stream and reducing the amount that we have to landfill. And that provides some interesting opportunities to us. One is it will extend the life of this facility and provide a safeguard to future generations by allowing us to maintain local control over our waste stream and how we manage our waste stream, and not get put into a position of having to ship waste to different cities or different states and putting that control in other people's hands about what that cost could be. One of the ways that we're looking at doing this is to create opportunities to foster development with private entities to help identify new ways to pull materials out of the waste stream and use them beneficially. And in the end, we believe this will enhance the operational compatibility between us and our current neighbors and our future neighbors. Ultimately, we realize it is important for us to be the best neighbor we can. And I hope that what we've shown here tonight and in our past presentations is we are working diligently on being that best neighbor that we can be. Obviously, there's challenges, but we're always working on trying to reduce the impacts associated with this operation. So with those 6 tenets in mind, before I did that, I did want to talk a little bit about the population growth. This is a snapshot of what the area looks like right now. Again, the authority's facilities in the middle of that picture in that green rectangle. And you can see the cities of Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville adjacent on our boundaries. And right now there's still quite a bit of open arid space around our facility and within those different city limits. But over the next 30 to 50 years, the growth is projected as follows. And you can see a lot of the residential and commercial development abutting right up to our facility. So again, that to ensure that the facility can remain viable and provide the critical piece of infrastructure that we do to the communities, it is incumbent on us to be as the best neighbor we can be. So with that growth in mind and some of the challenges I noted, the authority put together 2 different concepts for how we could utilize our properties to address those needs in the future. And they include several key operational elements that are in the yellowish gold, orangey color. One is to provide additional landfill capacity to the degree that it's needed in the future. Secondly is to expand our construction and demolition processing area, considering the projected development in the area. We will need to be able to handle those construction wastes. In response to SB 1383, we're looking at expanding our organics management area, which is denoted here as composting, but is not necessarily limited to composting. We'll be looking at other options and technologies that can help us manage those organics as beneficially as possible. And then finally, having an expanded area for the public to use the facility to improve the convenience and the safety to our public users. So even after we identified those key elements that we needed to address and use our future lands for, we had quite a bit of space left over, and that's denoted in those areas that are shaded blue. And we believe that provides us an opportunity to work with private institutions and develop private-public partnerships to bring in new technologies and methodologies to help us manage recyclables in the future, and hopefully establish markets for those recyclables right on our property here instead of trying to send them over to foreign countries. And we've also identified some area to start to work with current and future universities. We're currently working with William Jessup University in Rockland. They do some research and development here on the site. And we're having some conversations with Sacramento State. They're very interested in partnering with us as well. So there's a lot of opportunities here to shift how we look at solid waste management and move towards a resource opportunity here where we look at those wastes not as a waste product, but as a resource to produce new products and fuels and energy. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie to talk about one of the tools that we've developed to help provide a little more insight about our future plans.
So it's a little difficult to, one moment, a little difficult to kind of grasp some of the concepts that we're considering in the waste action plan. So we created this visualization tool to help people understand current operations and to also showcase some of the proposed features of the waste action plan. So the tool depicts various project elements in the two plan concepts in the year 2050 and again at final project build out. So this view here shows our existing operations, and each circle has a drop-down explanation of the area of the existing facility. So I just chose this. This is the existing composting of green waste and organic materials. And then this view is, let's see, view one. So that's what the facility could look like in 2050 under plan concept 1. So that same area that I showed you the organics today would become an area for recovered material storage. So recyclables that are recovered from processing, we would store the products there. So then you can select different concepts and build out years to see the proposed changes. So plan concept 1 in, oh, this is plan concept 2, sorry, in 2050. That same area, again, now is organics management operations. So they've expanded under concept 2 in this same area. And then another feature of the tool is the ability to see the plan concepts at different build out periods from various vantage points surrounding the authority's properties. So if I was curious as to what things might look like when I make my weekly trip to the Thunder Valley Buffet, I would select view 8, and then I could see what things will look at like in 2050 under plan concept 1. From the penthouse when I win big. Or if I wanted to see what my commute is going to look like in the years to come as I drive down Fitment, I could select view 2. And this is what you would see as you're traveling down Fitment. So we encourage you to explore this tool. There's so many views and different options that you can see. And let us know if you experience any issues using this. My email pops up right when you open this tool on our renewableplacer.com website. So please don't hesitate to contact me. If I can't fix it, I know people who can. And it's a really awesome tool to kind of orient you with the facility and what things might look like in the future. And I'm going to turn it back to Eric.
Thanks, Stephanie. There we go. Thank you, Stephanie. Just to echo that again, I would encourage folks to go visit renewableplacer.com and play with this tool. It is built on a Google Earth type platform, so you can zoom and pan and tilt and really explore what the authority's plans are in this visual tool. It's really quite interesting and fascinating. So where are we at in terms of the waste action plan? Over the past couple of years, we've been working on the actual master planning element to determine how we could best use our properties. And we're now in the environmental review stage. So we're preparing an environmental impact report that we anticipate releasing for public review in the spring of 2021. So I would encourage folks to keep their eyes out for that so you can look into detail about what we're planning and provide us any comments that you may have. Following that environmental impact report, once our board certifies it, then we will move into the subsequent stages of actually obtaining the necessary facility permits to take care of those operations that we've identified in the master planning effort, and then go into design and construction, and then revise the operating agreements and implement those changes. So that's a way of to suggest that the environmental impact report is not the end of the process, it's a step of the process. And there's still a number of steps to happen after that impact report is completed. So that concludes our prepared presentation for tonight. At this point, we would like to open it up for questions and answers, if questions from you and hopefully answers from us. And as I noted at the start, we will answer them in the order that they were received. I would ask that folks, when the Zoom moderator opens up your mic and unmutes you, please limit yourself to one question. Avoid follow-up questions at this point so we can make sure that we answer everyone's questions. And if we have time at the end, we can answer any other follow-up questions. So with that, Jeremy, do we have any questions for the panel? We have no hands raised. Oh. Okay, well, we'll give you a minute. I know we went through all this information pretty quickly, and it's certainly interesting to speak to a camera instead of speaking to you live, but hopefully you do have some questions for us. We're here. All right. All right. Good evening, Mr. Cook. You are live. What's your question?
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for doing this again. I really appreciate it. It's really good information for the neighborhood and the people around us. My question tonight is about the organics, and when are we going to get to the place where they'll be picking up separate bins for organics from residential? Is that in that 2050 plan or not?
And that's a great question, and is one that we're working with our member agencies on right now. Some cities are looking at the idea of co-collecting green and food waste together. Other agencies are looking at alternative methods. So right now, I believe the city of Roseville is doing a pilot study to evaluate the details associated with co-collection of green and food waste. But how all the agencies respond in the future is still yet to be seen.
But that is part of the plan for 2050.
It very well could be. Again, if there could be other methods in which we're able to recover the amount of organics that we need to comply with those regulations that may not necessitate co-collection of food and green waste, but that's yet to be seen.
I just want to add to that collections are determined by the individual jurisdictions. So whatever they decide to do to address their needs, we will be accommodating here at the facility. So we don't know exactly how the collections are going to occur. We just know that we'll be handling the material once it gets here.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, is that the first one up there? Yes. So this is a site question from you. So Keith, I'm gonna actually have you read it.
Okay.
Sorry, I think oh, okay. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Ed.
Oh, yeah. I actually don't have a question. I just really wanted to show appreciation for the efforts that you are to maintain a facility there, understanding that the growth that is going to be coming into your vicinity and trying to be a good neighbor, addressing those things, being proactive and looking for ways of being able to address the odors, even though, you know, this is a odor workshop. I really was looking at the aspects of what you're doing to plan for the future and make sure that things are being addressed. So I do appreciate that, and do appreciate that forward-looking approach to deal with these things before it becomes unmanageable. So thank you and your staff for the hard work on that.
Great, thanks for that. I appreciate that comment. Okay, Joel.
Good evening, sir, and thank you all for agreeing to do this and giving the information. It's very helpful. We recently moved into Fitterman Farms area, and we've noticed over the past several weeks, and we had noticed over the time that we've been here in about a year, that there seems to be a strong sour odor that will occur on evenings, usually in a 3-hour period starting between 6 p.m. and going to like 9 p.m. or so. It seems to be consistently in that time period. It seems to be present irrespective of wind conditions, wind direction, what temperatures, those types of things. I was wondering if there's anything that's happening that would be causing that at that time period that you're aware of, or something that could explain the consistency of the odor at that time.
Sure, I think I can take that question. As the air pollution control district would probably point out to you too, and thank you for your question. When the temperatures drop in the valley, it tends to reduce the amount of mixing that goes on in the local area, and so it kind of in effect concentrates the any odors that are in the area. As for why you might be experiencing the odor kind of regardless of wind direction, I'm not sure. Our facility is certainly capable of producing a sour odor that you've described that can come from sometimes from the landfill gas smell and sometimes just from the waste itself. So I hope you're able to report some of these so we can get out there and experience it as well. We do have some response times overnight. So even if you're experiencing at 6 p.m., you know, if we see that happening a couple of times, we will send someone out oftentimes to confirm that smell and try and trace it back to a smell that we know here. But yeah, I would say that we're in that season, that particular climatic condition now where it doesn't take very much smell here to unfortunately be experienced off site. As for has anything changed particularly here to cause that, the landfill itself is a fairly routine operation, and it is, you know, capable of producing that smell, as I mentioned. Thank you, Stephanie. What, if anything, has probably changed, it might be the pond for the composting system. Since we have switched to the aerated static pile composting system, it produces what looks like a stronger version of the water coming off that composting system that goes into a lined pond and is recycled back into the composting system. And in the last couple of days, it's had a pretty strong smell, and even tonight we smelled it. So we're looking at ways to identify whether that's a biological growth or whether that's just something mechanical that we can pull out of the water and get the smell out of the air. But as of yet, we haven't figured out quite what it is, but we know where it is, if that's any help.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the information.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take it. Go ahead, Mr. Cook.
Hey, this is kind of a technical question, but it's kind of understanding how you.
Sorry. My fault. Oh, looks like we accidentally muted you.
Okay, that's okay. How you plot the odor plumes, and I assume you're using some software like Cameo, where you have Marplot and Aloha to plot the plumes, and they figure in the wind and the temperature and all of that. If you are using something like that, I just wonder how you come up with the volume, because you know, if you look at the hazmat situation or smoke, it's kind of the same thing, but somehow you have to enter in a volume. And so, you know, that's certainly going to affect the distance it can go along with the wind and the temperature and all of that. So I guess it's kind of a technical question, and if the software does it all magically, then that's great, but I doubt it does.
I'll go ahead and start, and then we'll pass it off to any other staff members that may be able to elaborate. But you're absolutely right, Mr. Cook. We do have a piece of software that we utilize here. Jennifer had touched on it. It's our odor modeling and monitoring system. It's produced by a firm by the name of EnviroSuite, and it does take the atmospheric conditions of temperature, wind, barometric pressure, and uses those to do an odor dispersion model using the CalPuff method. We, as Keith had shown earlier, we have taken some samples on site of different odor producing sources here at the site, including the landfill gas, composting, and we use those emission factors and the size of those operations coupled with those environmental conditions to estimate the different transport of odors off-site and around the area. I will not suggest that I understand the system fully because it is a rather complex topic, but we do have a good amount of comfort level in the system. It is a dispersion model that's used not just for odors, but any kind of air dispersion modeling. So with that, Keith or Stephanie or Jennifer, you have anything to add to that?
This is Keith. I would add, Eric and I worked on getting that system in back in 2015, I think, and then we've all had a hand in seeing it progress to where it is now. And Jennifer's probably the most familiar with it now. But I can tell from starting up that system initially, there is a comfort level we have with it, and we don't expect that just because the plume stops somewhere in a vacant field currently that you're not experiencing the odor, because we are familiar with the plume, as it were, being farther and sometimes closer to the site than what's depicted in the model. But the general direction and intensity of it seems to be pretty accurate most of the time. And so it's a useful tool to us to identify, but it does rely on, in some cases, that polycarbonate pod I showed you in the slide back there that was sitting on the compost, that was a one-time, or I guess maybe 3 or 4 times now, but a single measurement in time of how much volume, as you were saying, of the odor is coming off a particular section of the site at any time. So for the rest of the time, we're really relying on a couple of those static inputs to the model. And then, like Jennifer said, the 3 or 4 on-site electronic noses, as well as the ones that we're considering putting in now that will be off-site.
Okay, that answers my question. I think it's really great you guys are doing this. I've never heard of a landfill operation doing this before, and I think it's just super that you're doing it and that you have such good control over it that you can pinpoint things. So once again, thank you.
And thank you again for the comment. We do appreciate that feedback. So we've got a couple questions here in the chat or comments. The first one, it's please install the offsite odor monitors at Fitiment Farm and Fitiment Ranch area. So as Jennifer mentioned, we appreciate that feedback. It sounds like it is positive that folks would like to see these offsite monitors. So we will do a little research and perhaps take something to our board to see if they are interested in making that investment. These are not inexpensive units, but we think that it's a good step forward to provide us kind of an early warning system out there in the community. Keith, you want to talk about the composting going forward?
Yeah, in response to Karen's question about the new composting plan going forward. Currently, the pilot study that we've been involved with for a couple of years, it's covered by another layer of finished compost. It might be completely screened, or it might not be screened, but it is a 1-foot blanket over the aerated static pile composting with the intent of letting the biology do its job and form like a natural biofilter to the air that at this point would be blowing out of the pile, because right now we are using a positive aeration, positive flow into the pile, blowing out the top of the pile type of system. In the future, I think we're still proposing the positive, but I believe it's open to doing the negative air. The negative air system just has some more, you have to manage the water. There's some other tricks, but it's possible as well. Should I answer?
Can you explain a little bit about how in the negative it's pulled through and then goes through a filter?
Right. So in the negative aeration system, were we to install that? And again, this is all subject to what Eric was talking about with the master plan, waste action plan update. In that negative system, we would pull the ambient air into the pile, through the pile, and then discharge it into its own separate biofilter. And then that makes it a little easier for us to monitor the discharged air quality. And we could probably do that continuously with some of the odor e-noses that we have in existence, or new ones specifically outfitted for that. So there's some advantages to the negative air system in that regard. The other way, pushing it through, we have to find out where it's coming out the pile and catch it there. And it's a little harder to catch the smell that way.
So the next question is, have you thought of channeling green waste to places like Green Solutions or similar facilities to reduce the loading here at the authority's facility? And so there are some other facilities that do accept green waste, some of those very close to us as noted above. And that is normally at the discretion of the entity that is delivering the green waste. So we see a number of contractors and landscapers that will use those alternative facilities, because in many cases they are less expensive than we are. But as Stephanie noted, really our main charge is to be here to meet the needs of our member agencies and our customers. And so to the degree that that material is brought here, we will figure out how to manage it. And at the end of the day, if some of those private entities decide to reduce the amount that they can accept, or they go out of business, or they move, we will still be here to manage that material on behalf of the county and the cities. So I don't know that we would be redirecting material, but certainly customers can essentially redirect that material to those other facilities and help reduce that loading here. But I think ultimately we still anticipate growth in that sector over the next 20 to 30 years. Someone else want to?
I'll do the next one. So the next question is, do trains traveling near there bring waste in open air cars? We do not receive any waste that is hauled in via rail. All of our waste is accepted from within Placer County via trucks or transfer trucks. So no other waste from outside the area is hauled in here.
And April says, thank you for all you're doing. It's very much appreciated. Thank you, April. April sits on a stakeholder working group that the authority established along with other key stakeholders in the area, including representatives of the casino and the Placer Ranch project, and some of the area residential communities. And so we were working on providing more information and insight about what the authority is doing and how we plan on moving forward. And April's been a champion of that and involved in that from the very get-go. So thank you, April. Appreciate your participation and appreciate those kind comments.
For this next one, Jennifer, do you remember where the parks are that we're looking at?
I believe it was Stizzo Park, Mel Hamill Park, and Davis Park.
Right. So to answer the question, please install the odor monitor at Crocker Ranch Area 2 we're looking at those 3 parks.
Yeah,
right
potentially
now.
there would be 2 sensors that would be in the Crocker Ranch Blue Oaks area, and 1 sensor would be in the Fitiment Farms. And depending on,
There's
Oh.
part of that. Go ahead.
depending on, how beneficial these sensors are, and the feedback we get, there could be the potential of us placing these in additional communities as well.
Right. And our thought with trying to locate them in parks was that these would be the first ones we've installed. The existing on-site odor noses do take some maintenance. And so we need to have access to them, and we didn't want to put them somewhere where we'd have to get discretionary access at random times when they, have issues. So we're working through that. And then the last question, when will this new composting begin? It's actually, like I said, it's a pilot program right now. So it's underway in the positive aeration type program, again, with the biofilter on top of the active compost. And then the other half of the facility is still the old style windrow composting for the time being. We do have those permit applications going out, I think the rest of them this week. So it could be perhaps 6 months from now before we're full scale with, well, I say half scale, half of the facility doing full scale arid static biocomposting, if that makes any sense at all.
I think so. The ultimate goal is to move the entire composting facility to the ASP process, but that will likely not happen until the waste action plan is approved and permitted, and those elements of that project begin to be constructed, which is a few years.
Yeah, that's correct. So it is probably a couple of years out from full implementation of ASP. I would like to point out that the authority has initiated a procurement process for future material recovery facility and landfill operations. And that is one element that we've identified in those procurement documents, is that the contractors will need to operate using the ASP. So it is certainly where the authority is moving in terms of how we operate our composting facilities in the future, but it will take a little time to get to full implementation. All right. Okay. I'm gonna need some help there.
Okay,
I'm
read it.
reading it.
Oh,
The next question is the WPWMA executed an MOU with Placer County to implement a smell remediation program at a cost of $19 million. What is the funding source for this program, and how will it affect Placer County residents' tipping and collection fees?
So it is true that the authority entered into a memorandum of understanding with Placer County, and that was related to the county's Placer Ranch development program to the south of us. It was the agreement was not for 19 million. It was for a partial funding by the Placer Ranch development as it develops, to provide funding towards odor mitigation measures that would be employed by the authority. It's always been envisioned that that contribution from Placer County and Placer Ranch would help offset some of those costs, but there would be other costs that the authority would likely need to bear directly and would be passed through tipping fees to its customer base. However, it's viewed that those fees that would be passed through to the customers via its tipping fees are really intended to ensure the long-term viability of this facility. And so there is a benefit to the broader rate payer base to pay an incremental amount towards odor reduction. Okay. All right. So unless there's any other questions or comments, oh, we had one pop up there. There we go. Couple.
all right. Bingo.
Read it. The next question, the Placer Ranch developer is proposing to pay a quote fair share of less than $5 million. Please respond to the question above again.
Well, so the comment there is that There is an agreement between the authority and Placer County on a cost-sharing mechanism for implementation of certain odor mitigation measures here at the site. I think that's probably about, it's about as much as I can say, because that's really what the agreement is about, is how can we share in costs to reduce odors in the area.
Okay. Last question there. So several of your residential neighbors within direct view of the authority routinely experience odors on a regular basis when folks living farther away in Roseville and other cities do not. Since we suffer odors often, can a discount plan be considered and extended to us closer neighbors when we bring refuse to the facility as a compensation for the odors we endure? That gets into rate setting. I'm going to point left on that to the manager.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question indeed, and a policy that our board would need to consider. I think it's important to understand that at the same time that the additional cost that the authority incurs to reduce odors also preferentially benefit those that are closest to us. So it's an intriguing idea. It's not one that I think we've explored in depth. Really, our goal is to do the best we can to reduce odors and be the best neighbor we can, and to try and take those resources here and reduce those odors, as opposed to providing credits back to local residents.
You're gonna take this
All right.
one. From Leslie Warren, I was disappointed to see that the Placer Recycles flyer suggested no waste reduction or avoidance of single-use plastics. Why did reducing not find any voice in the flyer? I believe that may be the waste action plan fact sheet. Not quite sure.
No, I think she may be talking about that little newspaper insert thing that came out a little bit ago.
Yeah, perhaps Leslie, you could provide a little bit of.
Okay, good.
Oh,
That was right.
Newspaper insert. All right.
Winner.
Well done, Keith. Well done. I don't know. You want to address that one?
I don't recall if there was a waste reduction section. I haven't viewed that insert in a while, but we have some new outreach consultants on board, and one of our recent meetings with our Placer County Regional Recycling Group was to begin or enhance our focus on waste reduction. So some of that messaging as we develop our new campaigns will revolve around waste reduction, and we'll definitely address single-use plastics in that.
But I think that piece that we did put out is one step of many that we use in our outreach process. And so it was a first opportunity for us to try that vehicle and that type of outreach mechanism. So I'm glad, one, that it was seen and viewed and read. That's a very positive sign, and it gives us an opportunity to build off of that in the future. So
Yeah, and it was also a piece that we felt was trying to educate the residents on the programs and services that are provided by the authority and the jurisdictions, rather than a general kind of recycling and waste reduction piece. It was more geared toward the services that are available to residents.
So the next two comments are very much in line with each other. It has to do with odor and the potential health impacts associated with that odor. So the literature that we've been able to find would suggest that odors are predominantly a nuisance and are not a significant health risk to a majority of the population. There are certainly sensitive receptors that may experience that differently, but for the most part, odors are considered a nuisance and not a health risk. And in our environmental document, we will be conducting a very extensive air analysis, which will include a health risk analysis and address not only odors, but other emission potentials from the site and how that could impact nearby receptors in the near and long term. All right.
I'll read it. I think you could probably answer better. Question is, or comment, can you not put a camouflage scent over the composting for a while? So we can see if it's better without than with it. The cherry scent and pine scent are so horrid. I think they might make it worse. And the cherry scent, I assume you've been here for a while, and we did try an odor neutralizing product at the landfill, and then again at the materials recovery facility that did have a cherry tracer, so we could try and establish how far the agent was being carried in the natural wind. And we did get a number of notifications that they were smelling cherry before we actually started spraying it. And unfortunately, in this case, we stopped that. When was that? We were just looking at
So
that.
that pilot odor neutralizer project was run over about 4 months in 2013 or 14, and we have not used that cherry tracer since.
Right.
And we never used a pine scent tracer.
So if that's the smell that you're smelling, I don't doubt it, but it's probably some other, what do they say on the 0 calorie sodas, natural flavors that just happen to be coming your way, perhaps from our facility.
Well, and it could be, as we noted earlier, there are other odor sources in the region, and those other odor sources may be using some form of neutralizer that we don't even know about. So there could be neutralizers that have that masking scent that are coming from other facilities. We're not aware of any neutralizers that are being used by other facilities, but I think, again, it is important to recognize that we're not the only odor producing source in the area.
Right.
And the last one here has to do with roadside dumping of material. We do consult periodically with Placer County, who will do a number of the roadside cleanups for areas that are further away from our facility. Unfortunately, folks do end up dumping waste on many of the rural roads around here. Our operations agreement with our material recovery facility operator does obligate them to do cleanups on the roadways adjacent to our facility, roughly 2 miles up and down the Fitiment and Industrial and along Athens. So there is some ongoing road cleanup, but that it doesn't address those further out dumpings. But we do talk with Placer County periodically when we learn of those so that we can direct their attention to those points. Okay, so it looks like that may be the end of the questions and comments. Going, gone. All right, I'd like to thank everybody for participating tonight and hanging in there with us in this Zoom type meeting presentation. Hopefully in the near future, we'll get back to being able to have all of you folks here publicly with us, but we'd like to hear some feedback. Was this beneficial? Was it easier and more convenient for you to participate in a virtual based meeting rather than an on-site meeting? So we'd love to hear your feedback. We're always looking to improve and make this a better experience for you. So we've got some poll questions going here. Please go ahead and participate in that. We'll see what kind of feedback we get.
I've never seen
Nice. That's kind of cool to see it happening in real time.
Yeah.
And how much time do we give this journey?
70%.
Okay, there's a couple of you out there to vote still. There we go. Make your voice heard.
Interesting. Virtual.
Yeah,
by far.
all right. So it appears that most of you out there like this virtual format. So we are happy to continue doing it this way. Hopefully we can actually make a bit of a hybrid so that we can have some in-person attendance, but continue to do this virtually. Which topic was most interest to you? Regional odor sources, good. And the odor monitoring. So good, appreciate that. I think it's really important to understand what's going on out here in the region and what at least we're trying to do to understand those odors better and reduce those impacts. Okay. All right. See the slides of the information shared side. Oh, okay. So we will post the PowerPoint presentation of tonight's presentation on our website, and as well as when we're able to download the recording and video for this presentation, we'll put that on the website as well.
And we'll also prepare a summary of the questions and answers on our website.
One more question about when will the monitors be put at the parks? We still have to work with the park owner, which in this case is the city of Roseville. So far, they sound willing and interested, but we do have to work through those agreements. And then it would be something that our board would have to vote on to proceed with. There's some substantial amount of money that's got to be approved to design that and install that and get that under monitoring. So I would say a couple more months and we'll have some of these issues hammered out and have it for our board's consideration early next year.
Yeah, and what we're really hoping to do tonight is to solicit some feedback, and if there's interest by the public out there for us to utilize these types of sensors. And so certainly what we're hearing from you tonight is that there would be an interest. And that's very helpful. So we can take that issue back to our board and do a little more investigation. So stay tuned. Hopefully the next time we chat, we will be talking about monitors are actually in place.
And if you're interested, we can contact you and just let you know when they have been installed.
And when it's been considered and approved by our board.
Right.
That brings up another important piece is that our board meetings are open to the public. They are public meetings. We post our agendas on our website a week before the meeting. You are more than welcome to attend those meetings. We've been doing some of them virtually lately. So again, you can track what we're doing and what we're taking to our board for their consideration and have your voice heard there as well.
And I just wanted to add to that with our CEQA process for the waste action plan, there will be a lot of opportunity for public involvement. So you can come and comment at our public hearings for that. You can write in comments to us. So all of that information will be on our Renewable Placer website. So, and all of the opportunities for engagement by the public will be posted there.
All right, well, great. Thank you everyone again for your participation tonight. Look forward to seeing you in person hopefully soon. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the meeting. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.